Human nature is filled with the desire to do good. From childhood, we are taught to be kind, to help others, to share, and to show compassion. Goodness is linked with light and nobility, and we tend to believe it can never be too much, yet life is far more complex. Even the most sincere intentions can sometimes bring unexpected harm. As the old saying warns, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Goodwill alone is not enough. It matters how and when we act so that our kindness does not turn into harm. Once, a man noticed a butterfly struggling to free itself from its cocoon. Moved by pity, he decided to help. He carefully tore the cocoon, making the butterfly's emergence easier. The butterfly slipped out effortlessly, but it never managed to fly. The man didn't know that the very struggle to break free is what strengthens its wings for flight. His hasty compassion, born from the best intentions, became a tragedy. Kindness without understanding, kindness that comes too early or is forced, can wound. Like that butterfly deprived of its strength, like a person smothered by our help, or even ourselves when our good deeds backfire. This is the channel Procrustean Bed. My name is Roman. I want to apologize right away for using AI to soften my strong accent. I hope it doesn't spoil your experience of this video. And as always, I kindly ask you to leave a like and a comment so this video doesn't drown in YouTube's endless recommendations. No good deed goes unpunished. This humorous aphorism captures the same bitter truth. Most of us have felt it, that sting of disappointment when kindness somehow turned into trouble. You help a friend, but it strains the friendship because he now feels indebted. You guide a colleague, and suddenly you're accused of arrogance. Even excessive care for loved ones can breed dependence or rebellion instead of gratitude. These experiences remind us kindness requires as much wisdom as any other act. This raises a paradox. Can someone be too kind? Where is the boundary between virtue and naivety, between generosity and wastefulness, between kindness and permissiveness? These lines are fragile, often crossed unconsciously in the heat of goodwill. This monologue is an invitation to reflect on the phenomenon of goodness and its measure. Together, we'll explore why kindness needs balance, and we'll turn to psychological experiments and real-life stories to better understand how to act with a kind heart, but not blindly. The ancient thinkers warned us about extremes. The Greek philosopher Aristotle introduced the concept of the golden mean, the balance one should seek in all things. Virtue, he argued, is a kind of equilibrium between two vices, the excess and the deficiency. Every virtue decays once it crosses the boundary of measure. Courage, for example, is praised, yet without balance it turns into reckless risk, while its lack becomes cowardice. Generosity is admirable, but taken too far it leads to waste and ruin. Too little of it slides into greed. The same is true with kindness. Excessive kindness may dissolve into weakness or indulgence of evil, while its absence breeds cruelty and indifference. Aristotle's wisdom about measure echoes through many cultures. The Latin maxim est modus in rebus translates as there is measure in all things. Even water and sunlight, the sources of life, destroy when in excess. Floods spoil the harvest, and the noon sun scorches the earth. So it is with goodness. Stripped of balance, it mutates into its opposite. As physicians say, the difference between a medicine and a poison is only the dose. A cure itself may harm if overdosed. Likewise, the impulse to do good must be tempered with reason. History and literature abound with examples of excessive good turning into disaster. With the best intentions, parents may overindulge their child, fulfilling every whim, only to raise a selfish adult unable to face life on their own. Rulers, in pursuit of utopian happiness, sometimes establish repressive regimes, justifying violence as a greater good for the nation. Fanatical belief in a righteous mission led inquisitors to their pyres and revolutionaries to terror. A noble goal does not sanctify immoral means. Unchecked goodness, given too much power, easily mutates into evil. As C.S. Lewis once observed, of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. His remark reveals the paradox. The desire to save others against their will, at the cost of their freedom, becomes the harshest form of oppression. Every virtue, then, casts a shadow once it passes beyond its rightful boundary. Compassion without wisdom risks becoming indulgence. Tolerance stretched too far can mean submission to injustice. Love without limits can suffocate the very person it seeks to protect. Imagine a gardener who, out of love for his flower, waters it endlessly. Wanting the best, he drowns the roots, and the flower dies. The purpose of this image is not to frighten us away from kindness, but to show its dual nature. Sometimes, in order to remain truly good, we must hold back our impulse, take a step back, and ask ourselves, is my action truly helping now, or is it too much? On the psychological level, the question of balance and goodness becomes especially pressing. Psychologists even coined the term pathological altruism, an unhealthy, excessive orientation toward helping others, which in the end harms both the benefactor and those around them. Psychologist Barbara Oakley defines this phenomenon as an unhealthy focus on others at the expense of one's own needs. Such rescuers often sacrifice themselves without limits, burn out, or suffocate those they wish to help with their intrusive care. Real-life examples abound. Parents who overprotect their children, trying to shield them from every misfortune, often raise young adults unprepared for independent life. There is always the mother who, with the best intentions, does her child's homework, yet by doing so, she robs the child of the chance to learn self-reliance. Or the friend so eager to offer support that he crosses personal boundaries, and through his advice or interference only makes things worse. Sometimes our desire to help turns into control, or into diminishing someone else's effort. Renowned psychologist Adam Grant revealed an intriguing phenomenon in his research. People who constantly give and help everyone, so-called givers, may end up with worse outcomes in studies or careers than their more self-focused peers. In one study, students with a strong inclination towards sacrificial giving fell behind academically over the semester, admitting that they skipped classes and neglected their own learning to help friends with their problems. As a result, their own grades and progress suffered. The lesson here is not that we should refuse to help, but that excessive self-sacrifice without balance between self and others eventually harms everyone. The other side of kindness that wounds is when our excessive compassion harms the very person we are trying to help. In psychology, there is the concept of codependency, a situation in which the constant desire to support or save a loved one, say someone struggling with alcohol or drug addiction, ends up enabling their illness. For example, the wife of an alcoholic might cover for his absences at work, find excuses for his behavior, or clean up the mess after his drunken outbursts. She believes this is an act of love and goodness. In reality, such help only allows the addiction to persist. This is the excess of goodness that turns into harm. We reinforce the very problem we want to fight simply because we chose the wrong way to help. Friedrich Nietzsche harshly criticized compassion, calling it one of the greatest flaws of Christian morality. In his provocative style, he wrote that pity only multiplies suffering, extending the lives of the weak and the unfortunate. His stance is radical and controversial. It is hard to accept the idea that compassion itself is harmful. Yet there is a grain of truth if we understand compassion as blind pity, which prevents clear and sober choices. Excessive pity can rob a person of the chance to grow beyond their weakness. Sometimes, in order not to appear heartless, we indulge others' shortcomings, when in fact the greater kindness would be to let them face the challenge. The irony is that genuine goodness sometimes requires firmness, to say no, to set boundaries, or to allow another person to learn through struggle. And here we return to the theme of our previous video, Emotional burnout among those who dedicate their lives to helping others. Doctors, nurses, psychologists, volunteers, all of them risk losing their inner resources if they lack the discipline of self-preservation. Psychologists even use the term compassion fatigue, the condition when someone empathizes so deeply with the suffering of others that they themselves burn out, sink into apathy, or fall into depression. The paradox is that the most empathetic and tender souls, the ones most eager to heal and rescue, are those most at risk. Without healthy boundaries and care for oneself, their well of goodness runs dry. It is yet another example of how even noble care for others demands wise measure. One cannot draw water from an empty well. To keep helping, we must also nourish our own self. When reflecting on the limits of goodness, it is crucial to distinguish between its different motives and expressions. One of the cornerstones here is empathy, our ability to resonate with another's pain and feel it as our own. Empathy is often praised as an unquestionable virtue. It keeps us from becoming callous, nurtures a sense of connection, and motivates us to help. Yet modern research suggests that emotional empathy is not a panacea. It carries its own traps. Psychologist Paul Bloom, in his book Against Empathy, presents compelling evidence. Strong empathy for one individual can lead us to act unjustly toward others. In one experiment, participants listened to the story of a seriously ill child. Some were instructed to remain as objective as possible, while others were asked to imagine what the child was feeling. Then all were asked whether they would move this child ahead in the line for treatment, even if other patients were in a more critical condition. The results were telling. Nearly 3/4 of the empathetic group agreed to alter the cue in favor of that child, against medical priorities. In contrast, far fewer in the objective group were willing to do so. Genuine compassion for a single child had led volunteers to compromise the principle of fairness and equality. Emotion triumphed over reason. This empathy trap manifests on a broader scale as well. We tend to react more strongly to a single, vivid story than to faceless statistics. The death of one child, accompanied by a photo and details, strikes us as a tragedy, while news of thousands killed in war registers as abstract numbers. Psychologists call this the identifiable victim effect. A phrase often attributed to Stalin captures this chillingly. One death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. It illustrates the limits of our compassion. We may exhaust ourselves in grieving for a few, yet remain numb to the suffering of multitudes. Emotional empathy, in other words, is selective and distorted. It can channel our goodness in ways that are inconsistent and even irrational. Does this mean we should abandon empathy? Of course not. Rather, it suggests we need to complement it with wisdom. Here, the Buddhist notion of compassion offers a profound alternative, a form of rational mercy or loving kindness infused with a degree of detachment. Buddhist monk and scientist Matthieu Ricard, sometimes called the happiest man in the world, explains the difference between exhausting empathy and healing compassion. Empathy makes us feel another's pain almost directly, which can lead to burnout. Compassion, on the other hand, is the sincere wish for another's well-being without necessarily experiencing their pain as our own. It is warm, steady, and loving, a feeling that motivates us to help but does not deplete us. When Ricard meditated on compassion in the laboratory of neuroscientist Tanya Singer, brain scans showed that the regions associated with personal pain did not activate. Instead, the areas linked to love and care lit up. He himself described empathizing with suffering as unpleasant and draining, while meditating on compassion felt like a warm, positive state infused with strong social motivation. The lesson is striking. It is not the intensity of our empathy that sustains us, but the quality of our compassion. This scientific and spiritual perspective shows us the path toward wise kindness, when we help not from a place of pity, but from love and respect. Practically, this means learning to unite heart and reason, to empathize but not lose our head, to help but not take full responsibility for another's life, to recognize that we are not omnipotent and do not need to be. Every person must walk their own path, endure both pain and joy. No one can do this for them. Our task is to be near, to offer a hand when it is truly needed, but not to carry them on our shoulders the entire way. Setting boundaries is not selfishness, but an essential part of mature kindness. Boundaries ensure that goodness remains effective and pure. Sometimes the best thing we can do for someone is to let them fall and rise on their own, while staying nearby, ready to support when asked. The same applies to ourselves. To be able to say no when our resources are depleted, when demands go beyond what is healthy. This is difficult because we fear seeming cold or losing love. But true relationships can withstand the word no. In fact, they require it. Without refusal, there is no real choice, and without choice, there is no sincerity. Here, the phrase we hear before plane takes off comes to mind. Put your own oxygen mask on first, before helping your child. When I first heard this instruction, it struck me. Shouldn't one immediately save the child? But it holds a profound meaning. If you do not take care of yourself, you may faint, and then you will help no one. That is why first comes the minimal care for one's own survival, the foundation, and only then the rescue of others. This principle applies not only to aviation, but to any situation of giving help. You cannot pour from an empty vessel. If you are exhausted, broken, and have lost the joy of living, your kindness will become pale and strained, or even unintentionally toxic. Caring for yourself is not a betrayal of the ideals of goodness, but the preparation of the soil so that goodness may grow.
Reflecting on the boundaries of goodness, we cannot ignore the theme of our own imperfection. At times, the excessive desire to be good, righteous, morally flawless turns into a trap of perfectionism. We impose impossible demands on ourselves to always be kind, generous, and think only of others. But a human is neither a robot nor a saint. Each of us carries a shadow, those natural feelings of selfishness, anger, and fatigue that inevitably show themselves. By suppressing them and trying to play the role of an ideally good being, we risk losing our true selves. Once again, Jung's concept of the shadow comes to mind. The unconscious dark side of the personality made up of all the unacceptable thoughts and impulses we repress. This applies also to the striving to always be good. The one who categorically denies within themselves anger, selfishness, or aversion risks suddenly exploding or collapsing into the opposite, cynicism and bitterness, when the cup of patience overflows. Accepting our imperfection is a necessary condition for genuine kindness. It means understanding I can make mistakes. I have the right to be tired. I can sometimes refuse or disagree and still remain a good person overall. Moreover, treating ourselves with kindness teaches us authentic kindness toward others. Psychological maturity lies in having empathy for oneself as well. This is not egocentrism, but healthy compassion for one's own being, as if you were your own friend. When there is this reservoir of self-acceptance within, doing good for others becomes easier, without the sense of sacrifice or the expectation of praise. You don't wait to be glorified for your good deeds. You do them from fullness, not from emptiness. True kindness is impossible without freedom. Freedom both for the one who gives it and for the one who receives it. Forced kindness becomes evil. We have already considered this, but compelled kindness, when a person forces themselves to be good, also brings no joy. From this come those hidden resentments. I did so much for them, and they, if you look deeper, such reproach means that somewhere in our soul we did not want or could not give that much. Our inner child was crying out for attention to its own needs, but we silenced it. Sooner or later, this dissatisfaction will surface. That is why empathy for our own imperfection also teaches us empathy for the imperfection of others. We are all imperfect, and that is normal. Everyone has their own measure of strength and endurance. Someone can volunteer around the clock and feel wonderful, while another needs solitude and recovery after just a few hours of social work. And by refusing extra load, they do not become bad. Our life experience differs as well. One who has endured pain may feel another's more acutely and respond more readily, or, conversely, close themselves off after being burned once. There is no universal formula for how much good to give the world each day, but listening to our true motives and feelings is essential, so as not to cross the fragile line where goodness
becomes too much. The very idea of measure in goodness may seem strange. After all, we're used to thinking of good as an absolute value. Yet, as we've seen, wisdom lies in balance. Goodness is inseparable from understanding. Only by uniting warmth with discernment, compassion with wisdom, do we reach that state where our goodness truly heals, supports, and creates. Imagine a bowl filled with water. The water is kindness. If the bowl is cracked or broken, meaning we've neglected ourselves, the water will leak away and no one will drink. If we pour without measure, overfilling, the water will spill wastefully and may even scald the one standing nearby. The art of goodness is first to fill your own vessel sufficiently, and only then to pour for others, without overflowing. Then every sip will bring benefit. The wisdom of measured goodness also means seeing the whole person. In helping, we must not reduce another to the role of a weak petitioner, nor humiliate with unsolicited care. Sometimes the highest kindness is trust in another's inner strength, respect for their right to err, and to follow their own path. It is like a teacher who, at the right moment, lets go of the student's hand, allowing them to walk alone while still watching over them nearby. Goodness is not always about softening every fall. Sometimes it is simply about being there while someone flies and stumbles, knowing they will be accepted with all their scars. Finally, goodness must walk hand in hand with truth. To lie in order to comfort, to indulge destructive habits just to avoid offense, such kindness is short-sighted. Genuine goodness is not the same as wanting to be convenient. It may be gentle yet firm, soft yet honest. This is the goodness that heals. When you tell a friend the truth, but with love. When you refuse, but with understanding. When you help, but do not live another's life for them. Let us return to the image of the path where we began. The road paved with good intentions leads to hell if the traveler walks it with eyes shut. But if the eyes are open, you see the potholes, avoid the traps, adjust the direction. Our good intentions are only the foundation. To reach paradise with them, we need the vigilance of reason and the sensitivity of heart. We should not fear doing good out of fear of making mistakes. We only need to remember that we are human, not gods. Our vision is limited, our wisdom imperfect. And it is precisely this acceptance that keeps us open to growth. The best kind of goodness is that which is done with love and awareness. Kindness is light, but even light has its shades and needs shadow to reveal the world's depth. By applying the right measure, we do not diminish goodness, we help it to manifest in its truest form.